and welcome to week 9. Can you believe the summer is almost over? I am in Abilene this week. I'm on the corner of South 14th and Barrow, which is a busy intersection. You can see the HEBs across the street from me. I am at Starbucks once again. My trip to Possum Kingdom was cut short on Wednesday. I was pulling into Possum Kingdom. I disconnected from my truck and I started to level things out. And the front landing gear broke. My home is now at the repair shop getting fixed. Technically, I am homeless. I'm staying with my wife's family out at the family ranch west of here. And there is no internet out there, no quality internet that I can stream with. So I've come into town. I apologize for the background noise and the cars and the stuff. I could either come here or I could go to the other Starbucks, which is next to the mall and just as crowded and bad. So I figured this would be the best place. This week, oh, one more thing. Surveys are up. Surveys will be up through the end of this week. Make sure that you do the surveys. This is the first time that I've offered this class, and depending on your surveys and depending upon your responses, will determine whether or not I ever offer it again. If you like this class, make sure you tell me so. If you'd like to see something different in this class, let me know so. If you think that this was a complete waste of your time and that you should not, I should never offer it again, let me know that as well. Hopefully this semester has been a great one for you. Hopefully you've learned a lot about the Frontier West and justice in the West. And this week we're talking about the range wars and the Posse Comitatus, and more specifically the Posse itself. So without any further ado, let's just jump into it and get going. The range wars. There were all kinds of range wars that ran around, and people were fighting over the future of our country, much like we're seeing today. There was a fight over the power of the dollar, the power of the land, the power of cattle. There was a big war in Colorado when somebody decided he was going to bring sheep into Colorado. That's one of the videos that you're going to watch, because it was, sheep will eat all of the grass all the way down to the dirt until there's only dirt, and it doesn't leave anything for the cow. The cow won't eat the grass all the way down to the roots like sheep and goats will. So when ranchers, can we call them ranchers? Can you call a sheep herder or a goat herder a rancher? My brother-in-law herds sheep. He has a flock of about 200 head that he's running on the family ranch. They call it the farm. It's always been called the farm. And they call it the farm because for 50 years, they grew sorghum. Half the property was wooded, half the property is field, and they leased that 50 acres to grow sorghum, so they called it the farm. Now they don't really, they've got a couple gardens, but they're not farming anything. It's mostly just pasture land. And the 50 acres of plowed fields has now gone back to wild. It's filled with cypress and jasper and oak and mesquite, and there's still sorghum that's growing wild, but there's no plowed field, so I can't really call it a farm anymore. I call it the ranch. And like I said, they've got about 200 head out there, and 2 llamas and 2 jackasses. And there's a couple Democrats too. That was funny. Please forgive me. Anyway, so these range wars were fighting over the land. The Johnson County range war was about homesteaders. And here in Texas, we like homesteads because if you only have one house, you can homestead it and you can get like a 60% discount on your property taxes. And for somebody that's now back in the homeowner market, home buying market, you know, I just got pre-approved for $280,000. Yeah, I'm not buying a house that much. That's just way too much money. I'm hoping to find a little 3 or 4 bedroom house on a couple acres in the Midland, Odessa area that'll pass a VA inspection. So if you know of any, you know, send me an email, let me know. They won't do mobile homes. They won't do manufactured homes. It has to be on a foundation. It has to be wood or brick or stone or something. But the house that I wanted to buy, they're not going to let me buy. Anyway, the range wars were set up to control power, to control the dollar, to control the influence of the courts, of the elected officials. So that's how they worked and how they went about. I think I mentioned, and yeah, I typed it in the discussions this past week. I watched a video on the Texas Rangers, and for the first 60 years or so of the Texas Rangers, there was no sheriffs, there were no marshals. All there was the Texas Rangers, and the government would set up the captains and the lieutenants of the Texas Rangers, and the Texas Rangers would go out and recruit people to go fight for them. You know, in the United States, Posse Comitatus was an important institution of the Western frontier. Okay, it became known as the Posse, and this is groups. You know, at various times they're vigilante committees. Oftentimes they're acting without any legal standing. They're organized posses that were organized by the Rangers or by the sheriff. You know, when Jesse James came to town and he robbed the bank, the lone city marshal or the county sheriff, you know, he couldn't fight the younger gang. He couldn't fight these outlaws. So he would ask the populace, and he would create a posse. And I know there's some discussion that you can't use the military or the armed forces to work as a posse. So Posse Comitatus Act outlaws the willful use of any part of the military, the Army, the Air Force, the Navy, Marines, to execute the law on the land unless it's been expressly authorized by the Constitution in defense of the nation from invasion, or the Congress and the Supreme Court have approved the use of military inside the United States. So after 9/11, what we saw was the National Guard, because the governor has the ability to call out the National Guard, and the National Guard or the State Guard, the Texas Guard, can enforce the rules, and they work under the jurisdiction of the local sheriff, of the county sheriff. Okay, and they walk off and they work you know, they work to enforce the rules and to round up bad guys. Okay. And that's what we found. And that's what this week is going to be about. We're going to be talking about the Posse Comitatus. Okay, it does come from the Latin, the power of the country or the county. In common law, is a group of people that are mobilized by a conservator of the peace. So a sheriff, a city marshal can call up his posse. A lot of these counties in Texas that I've been visiting, they have the sheriff's office and the deputies and all those people, And then just on the edge of town, there is a building that's known as the Sheriff's Posse. And these are volunteers that are willing to go out and work for the sheriff to help restore order, to help with missing persons, and to search fields, and to look for, like in Big Spring a couple of years ago, there was a woman that came up missing, and they went to the sheriff, and the sheriff said, well, we'll look, but we're not going to search these places. So myself and I think Jennifer A. And 100 or so people from Big Spring gathered at the hospital, and we searched all of the wilderness around the hospital. We searched the wilderness up and through the state, what at the time was a state park, and we looked all over the place for this woman because her family was absolutely convinced that she was missing. Well, a few days later, I think it was almost a week later, they found her spun out on meth in Midland, and she was okay. But the sheriff did not authorize this search. But so as long as we stayed in public grounds and we didn't lawfully trespass or we didn't cause any problems, the sheriff didn't interfere with our search. But a posse comitatus is established to suppress lawlessness or to defend a county from illegal actions. In my research on the Texas Sheriff's perceptions of the right-wing threat to domestic security, one of the sheriffs I was talking to, he said that, if he needs to, he'll call up the militia, the unorganized militia, to help defend the county from invasion. One of the district judges in the Amarillo area ordered the sheriff to use the unorganized militia to defend the county from invasion from the BLM and the EPA. The BLM being the Bureau of Land Management, not Black Lives Matter. The BLM, according to this sheriff, the BLM, the Bureau of Land Management, was the greatest risk to domestic security that he saw opposing his county. I found that shocking, to say the least. But this is the way that the posse was set up. But like we've seen in the Lincoln County Wars, and like you viewed in the videos for the Johnson County War up in the northern tier, northern plains, opposing factions would get a judge on their side to deputize a posse. And this posse would go around and fight for, defend the people. So the Johnson County War was this war against, and I know there's a movie that's running around starring Burt Reynolds and Luke Perry. Luke Perry represented the settlers, and Burt Reynolds was the sheriff who represented the land barons. And they went on this all-out war, killing each other and raiding and all over the power to control the ranch lands and the grazing lands of Johnson County. I think it was Wyoming or Montana, one of those two states. I'm now wanting to say it was Montana. I watched the videos the other day and I just don't remember, and I don't have any notes with me. All of this is coming straight off the top of my head. The term Posse Comitatus, like I said, is Latin. It's been used in America since the English-speaking world, since the late 16th century. It was shortened to just posse in the 17th century, while the original meaning did refer to a group of citizens or a citizens committee. And you hear a lot about that. The Southern Poverty Law Center has identified a few concerned citizens patrols in Texas to be white supremacists and extremists and right-wing and dangerous. Okay, the original outset for this idea, this thought of a posse, even the outset of a militia, was established to protect the law-abiding citizens of a county. In our upside-down world that we live in now, a posse or a militia is considered evil. It's right-wing, it's domestic terrorism, it's white supremacy. And I'm hoping that you have seen throughout these last 9 weeks that the narrative about the white supremacy is wrong. This country is not filled with white supremacy. This country is filled with a bunch of white historians who have written white history and have ignored the influence of the Hispanics and the African Americans that they've had on the of the foundation and the creation of the West. So this week we're going to talk about the posse. We're going to talk about the range wars. And let me find my little mouse so I can go back to our page. And then I can scroll down. This week's discussion. This week's discussions discuss the links between the posse, the range wars, and the struggle for power. Again, what we're looking at and what we discussed, or what I discussed in the forum last week, was this idea that the Texas Rangers, law enforcement, the gunslingers, and now the posses of concerned citizens, the militias that were established in the West, were established to bring order or to restore order. And that's what cops do today. You see police officers driving around, but they're driving around. I do not have any misconception that police are here to prevent crime, because I'm looking around. I'm at one of the most busiest intersections in the city of Abilene. The more fatality accidents have occurred right here, right there at that intersection, than anywhere else in the city of Abilene. And there's no cops here. There's a sheriff out of Wisconsin. His name is Sheriff Clark. He's an African-American sheriff, and he's one of my idols. Is it blasphemy to say that I worship him? He is an amazing sheriff. But one of the things that he said was that his sheriff's office, he's the sheriff it was of the Milwaukee area of Wisconsin, Sheriff Clark, and he said his office, do not count on his office to protect you from crime. It is your job to protect yourself from crime. And that's where we're heading with the defund the police. We're heading to a place to where it's going to be your responsibility to protect yourself. It's going to be your responsibility to protect yourself from crime. I carry a weapon because I can't count on the cops to be here. I can't count on the cops to prevent a strange gunman from coming into Starbucks and killing everybody here. I can't count on the police to prevent a bad guy from coming to my house and robbing and stealing everything that I own. Okay? It's up to me, and there is no, there's a Supreme Court case that Dr. Kickbush talks about in civil liabilities. There's no obligation for the police to protect you. So it's your responsibility to protect yourself. So with this in mind, and even in the Old West, when there was no law, there was no order, The citizens built these citizens commissions, these concerned citizen commissions, these militias, these posses to maintain order, to restore order, and to fight for and control power within the different communities and the different counties. I know I discussed about the war here. Okay, in 1860, Abilene was here. It was a little cow town. There was a couple of blocks over there. But the county seat for Abilene, Texas was in Buffalo Gap. Buffalo Gap was where the courthouse was. It's where the jail was. It's where all the whorehouses and the saloons were. It's where the buffalo hunters went, because that's where the buffalo were. And Buffalo Gap was ruled and was created as the county seat of Taylor County. Well, with the expansion of the railroad, okay, Abilene got its name. Abilene, Texas was named after Abilene, Kansas, because Abilene became a stop on the railroad and a place for the railroad. Was in the, it was part of the railroad. And as Abilene grew, there was a fight, and they took it to the courts, and the county seat was moved to Abilene. When the people of Buffalo Gap refused to move the county seat to Abilene, this council of concerned citizens, this militia formed up. They went to Buffalo Gap. They got all of the county records. They got the county clerk, and they got the county judge, and they brought them back to Abilene. And they said, here's your new courthouse. Here's your new office. This is the county seat. There was some gunfire exchanged. I don't remember if there was any life lost. But there was a fight and a war, and that's what the West was about. And through groups like the militias and groups like these posses and groups like the sheriff's posses, we brought about a national identity, and we brought about the world that we know of America today. But policing was set up, and I know there's a lot of people out there that want you to believe that the history of policing is about the slave patrols. That is incorrect. Okay. Yeah, let me just outright say it and not mince any words. That is a bald-faced lie. Law enforcement in this country was not established out of the slave patrols. The law enforcement was established in this country then and still exists today as a means to ensure order. Most of those slave patrols that were running around, not most, all of those slave patrols that were running around pre-1865 trying to find and recapture slaves and bring them back to the plantation, they were not working under the color of law. They were working as bounty hunters. So if you're wanting to link somebody to the slave patrols, you can link the bounty hunter to the slave patrols, because that's what they were. They would go down and they would contract themselves to go find escaped runaway slaves and return them to the slave owner. They were not cops. It was not law enforcement. They were bounty hunters that were working for a bounty. Okay, and that's the cold, hard truth. Law enforcement in this country was about power and control. It was about restoring order, and it was about protecting the innocent settlers and the innocent law-abiding citizens from outlaws, from Jesse James, from the Youngers, from the Daltons, from the Wild Bunch. There was a need for law enforcement established to protect innocent people from violence. And the Texas Rangers, as noted, went to the extreme to where, they shot first and asked questions later. And yes, there was some reform that was needed and has been done. But still today, and we'll discuss it more next week, because next week, you guys should be finishing up your final projects and moving on to getting things done. Don't forget to conduct your survey. Don't forget to conduct to complete your surveys and tell me what you think about this class. Tell me what you think about it being issued online. Is this something that you would like to see during the regular semester, face-to-face, or do you like the operating from and doing everything online? Granted, yes, you've got a lot of information from Starbucks, but that had to do with my trip. Depending on how this year goes, my trip next year is to go to Glacier National Park, and I'll be teaching from my computer at coffee houses or wherever I can get internet access. So I will see you on the forums. Have a great week. Make sure that you finish up your research projects and get them turned in as quickly as you can. If you get them turned in to me by this Wednesday, I will go through them and see if it is something that you need to do any major editing. Okay, talk to you later.